Let me just say that I believe McFarlane has signed way too many autographs. Those Sharpie fumes are definitely getting to him because McFarlane's latest reveal is an absolute head scratcher. I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll start off with the source material, which I didn't even know was a thing, but there's a comic book series, I guess, that is essentially like a crossover, a big, huge crossover event where it's like King Kong versus Godzilla versus the Justice League. Yes, you heard that correctly. I don't think that in a million years I would ever envision a crossover event like that. Now, I'm going to assume that this is maybe like King Kong versus Godzilla and they like maybe start duking it out like in Metropolis or maybe Gotham City. I think this was before they were like besties because now they're like, going around pummeling other big giant beings. But this is kind of an interesting idea slash concept, which, by the way, this actual set for me was pretty innovative. It was creative. It was kind of thinking outside the box. I'm assuming that the comic book is basically along those same lines. It's pretty cool to see something like that. Maybe the Justice League is essentially trying to protect all of the citizens that are in the radius of where these two guys are duking it out, where, maybe Godzilla and King Kong are going at it because maybe Godzilla insulted King Kong's mother. I don't know what the backstory here is. I'm just making it up as I go along. But like I said, it looks like a pretty interesting comic book series. I may go back and, read it or at least read a brief summary on it because it does sound, semi-interesting, which, like I said, applies to this triple pack. It is an interesting concept. I think in theory, on paper, it sounded really cool, but the execution is just absolutely putrid here. You're getting a pretty big, I don't know, like 9-10 inch quote unquote King Kong action figure. I've seen senior citizens with more articulation than this particular figure. And look, they have other options here. Like they could have easily retooled the Gorilla Grodd from not too long ago, which I think was like from one of the Flash comic book appearances. It wasn't a perfect figure, and I think, like I said, there definitely needed to be some retooling. They needed to, take away that ugly orange armor, but they could have done something special here and at least given the figure at least some points of articulation, like at least a single jointed elbow and some knees and just a little rocker at the ankles. I don't know, just the bare minimum I think people would have been happy with. This also comes with an extra head sculpt, but the absolutely disgusting slash dirty thing that McFarlane did here to his collectors or his collector fan base is that he's re-releasing two of the most overused action figures that I've ever seen. He's reusing, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but it looks like the same body mold for that 4-inch Page Punchers Batman, and then he is reusing that 7-inch DC Multiverse Batman. Both of those are, figures that we've seen before. Now, the 4-inch Page Punchers, I don't understand why he's reusing that because that is the cheapest plastic you can ever find. There are no points. I think there are like maybe 3 points of articulation on that figure, and it was thrown in with a comic book, if I remember correctly. But there's no need to be reusing that. I mean, if you wanted to do like a re-release in a few years and do the exact same release, maybe with a different comic book, I don't know, but there's no reason for him to be throwing that particular figure in there. It just looks really cheesy, especially with the King Kong that has no articulation. There's an image where he's holding the Batman, and he can't even hold it near to his face. Like it makes no sense. I will say the promotional images for these three figures, they were really well done. Like they're really well crafted. There's the 4-inch Page Punchers Batman looking up at, like King Kong's shadow. It's really well done. They did exactly what they needed to do to try to sell this triple pack, but there's nothing that's going to save this. I mean, if you're a hardcore McFarlane fan, you're very familiar with his tactics, and I think this is just something that's unacceptable from an OM. And look, there are diehards out there. There are people that are going to pick this up regardless of what it is that I say. But I just feel like this was really lazy. They could have done something different. And from what I can tell, that's actually a plastic cape. He didn't even go with a wired cape. You're paying $70 for this particular set. Would I even call it a deluxe King Kong? I don't know if I would even call it that, or what do they call it? The mega fig. I just don't feel that it's that. There's really no articulation. I think there's a cut at the mid torso, and there may be a cut at the shoulder, or where the arm connects to the shoulder. But that's it. That's all you're getting in terms of articulation. And then you're getting that small little 4-inch Page Punchers Batman reissued, as well as that Batman, which we've already seen a few times. I'm not even going to bother looking at the picture too closely, because, I mean, maybe there's a new head sculpt here. Maybe there's some slight little retooling of both of those figures, but I don't think it warrants the $70 price point, especially when that King Kong is just going to stand there and not really going to do much. There are other routes that I would have gone here. Like, I would have completely gotten rid of the 7-inch Batman action figure and maybe have done some, 4-inch slightly articulated or just full-on articulated Justice League action figures. Or maybe even if you just wanted to do the Batman and the Kong, give King Kong better articulation. Like I said, single jointed knees, single jointed elbows, maybe a swivel somewhere, and then made the 4-inch Batman articulated. I would have even paid maybe like the $60 to $70 price point if he had thrown in some extra accessories, maybe a display base, things of that nature. The Batman could have been like the equivalent of like the Star Wars Vintage line for the Black Series line, or the Star Wars universe, where the Star Wars Vintage is usually, like 4 inches, but it's pretty well articulated. There's still some really good paint applications. Like, they could have easily done that. Or if he wanted to go all out, he could have done like a King Kong Kickstarter maybe, and made like a 20-inch King Kong for like, I don't know, $250 to $300. Like, there are possibilities, and there are other routes that he could have gone here. I just don't think this makes a lot of sense, especially because that 7-inch action figure doesn't scale with Kong at all. I just don't feel like these two cross over too well, at least in action figure form. I mean, maybe the comic books are pretty good. They're a pretty good solid read. But just in action figure form, I just don't think that it really meshes. If you wanted to do, like I said, the smaller scaling, you should have done something special with the Batman instead of just reissuing that Page Punchers version. So if you collect DC Multiverse, or if you collect just anything McFarlane related consistently, like if you're a diehard, you already have like 66% of this 3-pack. Like, you already have the 2 Batmans. You probably already have the extra comic book that came with the Page Punchers. You're really only getting a new Kong figure. And is it really a Kong figure? Like, I've seen other OMs handle the King Kong franchise and the line of action figures that come with it, and I've seen a lot that are like within that 6-inch scale, or that 6-inch mark, that are usually much better articulated. And I get the Kong is, closer to 9 inches, but again, that doesn't really scale well with the 7-inch DC Multiverse. So why even have the Batman in there? Why even force that into the triple pack? I'll tell you why. Because it's greedy, it's lazy from McFarlane. He can just throw in 2 reuses and then give you a quote-unquote semi-brand new King Kong action figure. Like I said, in theory, in concept, this is a very good idea. Like, I genuinely believe that this could have sold really well if he had crafted, a very specific triple pack for those people that are genuinely interested in this. But I think as a whole, it just doesn't hold any value. And the fact that this is going for $70 is really a slap across the face to almost every collector that's out there. And look, I know the arguments that are going to be out there. If you don't like it, don't purchase it. But I think as a hardcore fan, especially people that collect, maybe not every single figure that comes out from McFarlane, but if you're collecting a decent chunk of his action figures, I think it's okay for you to demand a decent stream of action figures, right? Like, obviously, we're not going to pick up everything, but the fact that he's wasting resources on something like this, that there are factories out there manufacturing these and are taking away from us potentially receiving maybe a new Batman or a new Superman, or just something different, something that is going to get us excited. I just think it's a really missed opportunity here from McFarlane. Like I said, if he didn't want to break the bank, if he didn't want to do anything too expensive, he could have just done like a really well articulated small 4-inch Batman to scale with the 9 to 10-inch King Kong. I think most people would have been happy with that. I know it doesn't necessarily fit into the DC Multiverse, and I think that's the most cost-efficient one. Like, I know the Kickstarter one sounds phenomenal. Like, could you imagine a Kickstarter, 20-inch King Kong that would fit in with our DC Multiverse? That would be absolutely breathtaking. But obviously, because of, budgetary constraints and how big of a project that would be, let's just assume that it's much, much cheaper to just give that small little, 4-inch action figure, a Batman action figure, some really good articulation, and then give the King Kong better articulation as well, and just make it a 2-pack, maybe with some extra like effects or some extra dial pieces, maybe. I don't know, maybe some rubble. I'm just very disappointed because I do feel like this had potential. Like I said, maybe in the beginning stages where the engineers were in on it, maybe when they were designing the figures, it was all pretty new and exciting. But then once they got to the final product, they realized like, hey, we're essentially throwing in two figures that everybody that collects DC action figures already has, and then we're giving them this big giant chunk of plastic that we're calling Godzilla. It's just disappointing, not to mention the price tag, which I believe I checked Amazon and it was selling for $69.99. So you can pre-order this if you want. I mean, look, I'm not going to tell anybody what to buy, nor should you listen to anybody when it comes down to purchase decisions, but I just wanted to give you guys my personal 2 cents. I am very frustrated. I'm very disappointed in McFarlane. I think this was a really big opportunity for him to do something special, something creative, and it all went to waste. They're essentially just repackaging a couple of figures and giving you one of the ugliest King Kong action figures that you'll ever get. If you really want to put those like $70 to good use, probably just pick up the SH Figuarts Godzilla or King Kong that they released not too long ago, which I think are based on the movie. I've heard some great reviews for those figures, and you'll be paying somewhere around the same margin. Now, obviously, they're much smaller figures, but again, they were never going to scale well with your DC multiverse. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And it was kind of like a really, really difficult task for McFarlane to be able to put like a King Kong that's going to look well or display well. Most people that see that like in a DC multiverse display are just going to assume that it's like an off version of Gorilla Grodd. I don't think anybody's going to point at it and say, hey, that's King Kong, just because he looks a little bit weird in a DC multiverse display. And then the scaling just doesn't make sense. Maybe this, like I said, could have been a good segue for him to start off like his own quote unquote Star Wars vintage line, but with the DC universe, like maybe 4-inch, really well articulated DC action figures. Maybe he could have started something like that, and then eventually maybe release the rest of the Justice League in the small little package with, like, you know, the 4-inch versions of the Justice League. I think that could have been a little bit more creative. And again, it's not going to break the bank. Like, yeah, they have to go into production with these. They have to take, you know, the promotional images. They have to pay engineers to manufacture the figure or design it. And all of that is pretty expensive, but it's all less expensive than getting really bad PR, at least in my personal opinion. But as always, I'm very curious what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section. Am I wrong? Am I right? Do I at least make some valid points? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of like just rambling action figure nonsense, then stay tuned, because we do this pretty consistently, at least 3 to 4 times on a weekly basis, and potentially we'll be ramping it up within the next few weeks. So thank you guys for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. I know sometimes we complain, we bitch and moan about just random stuff, but it's important to enjoy it. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.